Hello, everybody. Welcome to As the World Burns. I am JL Folk, your host, and today with us, I have our guest, Craig DiLouie. Oh my God, he is author of the one that I know of and the one that I most recently read or listened to on Audible was Infection, the Infection series. So, Craig, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. Oh, we're more than happy to have you. I'm thrilled. I'm fangirling right now because I'm like, I just listened to this guy's books. And
Well, thanks
you
for reading.
have, God, you have some of the most, because you've got them, you have them up on Amazon, correct?
Yes.
And they're on Audible.
Yes.
And I listened to it on Audible. And so definitely the Infection Omnibus, which was the three books combined, correct?
That's right.
Okay. So I want to give the listeners and the viewers something that they can kind of get into. So can you give us kind of like, without giving anything away, an overview of your idea that has become this amazing trilogy?
Sure. The first book started as it's sort of a 28 days later type of zombie where the people are alive, they run, they're trying to kick the crap out of you and spread infection. That is basically their goal.
Hmm.
And so it's speculated like, where did this come from? Is it some type of alien colonization or is it something else? There's lots of different theories. We know what the characters know, and then we learn over the course of the series as they learn, the ones who make it anyway. And
Yeah.
so I had started in zombie fiction with a book called Tooth and Nail that did really well. It introduced me to a publisher called Permuted Press, and so
Hmm.
I wanted to write something that wasn't being done. And back then, there were only maybe 40 of us writing zombie books.
Right.
And now there's like thousands and thousands of titles. There's like so many choices for
Yeah.
readers. So I'm glad you chose mine, and especially a book that goes back to back in the day. This is like the 2011, I think the first
Oh,
book came out.
wow.
So I wanted to come up with some type of idea, and I was going, as a middle-aged dad, I was going through an existential crisis myself, and
Yes.
my existential fears for my kids, and I was thinking, there seemed to be two types of zombie fans. There were the people who like The Walking Dead,
Hmm.
you know, we're surviving, but are we living, and
Right.
ethical choices, and what does this mean, and how do, is it worth it? And questions like that. And if I if I save this guy, so and so is going to die. So I have to make this really horrifying choice. And then there's the what I would call the Z Nation tribe, who are people who are like they love Jailborn and like some of that vein of apocalyptic fiction where I'm the last man standing. I don't have to pay taxes. I don't have a job. I'm former special forces. I'm badass, and I'm going to go out and kick ass and get
Yes.
headshots and save the day and learn to care about other people. I'm not a loner anymore because now I have a tribe and I get the girl. And so it's like a lot of wish fulfillment. And both are just wonderful forms of fiction. And
Hmm.
and I welcome, it's a big tent, and that's great that people would like either one. But I always found myself more on the Walking Dead side.
Yes.
And I always thought, well, wait a minute, what my favorite thing about horror and monsters and the weird element is, okay, let's take this seriously. What if it was real? And so the infection was born almost like a character study of this group of people traveling around in a Bradley armored fighting vehicle. The squad has been wiped out, and they need infantry, so they grab some near civilians they can arm and train. And the
Yes.
civilians are just happy to driving around in this armored fortress. And it's just their sort of their travels in the first book, and they end up finding a refugee camp and committing to having a larger role. Not just I'm going to survive, but I want the species to survive. I want
Right.
everyone to survive, and that entails sacrifices. And because one of the things I found with zombie fiction is you you not everybody makes it, but
Hmm.
you have this sense oh God, the species is going to make it. And there's this weird cathartic sense of relief about that.
Yeah.
If like in The Road, Cormac McCarthy, like everyone's going to die. And it's
Yeah.
like, I love that
Yeah.
book, but it's like, oh, it felt really
Yeah,
sad at
right.
the end. It's not a
What's
happy
the
ending.
point? Right,
No,
what's the point?
exactly. What's the point of all this? And, this seems like the wife had the right idea. Because there's just no hope for anyone. And so I like the idea that these people may get the crap kicked out of them, and they may not all make it, and they may make certain sacrifices, but at least the species will survive, and there's a relief in that. And then that takes us into book two, where things continue, the stakes increase. Infection is an organism that is rapidly evolving, trying to find
Mhm.
perfection. It's intrigued by human intelligence, and it performs a grand experiment, which is could be even worse in terms of apocalyptic.
And it
And then you
was.
brings us to the last book where we have a choice of extermination, um, uh, surrender, infection wins, or some type of accommodation, where we work with infection and humanity makes its final choice. And then the series comes to a conclusion. But that last book, it was always supposed to be one book. Permuta
Oh,
Press said, yeah, Permuta Press said, I want another book out of you. I'm like, yeah, okay, I'll do one more. And so I made it a duology. And then had an agent. My books were selling so well that an agent was like, we want to get you into big five, Simon and Schuster, Hachette,
yeah.
St. Martin's Press, like the Penguin, the big publishers.
Mhm.
And I was like, yes, please. Because my
You're right.
dream since I was 9 was not to work with, I love working with small press, but
Mhm.
my dream was to see my name on a spine in a book in a bookstore. And so that meant something to me. That was my definition of success. So I worked with an agent to get my first horror novel, Suffer the Children, published by Gallery Books, same Simon and Schuster,
Uh-huh.
and that got distribution. And then from there, things went on. But after 10 years, and I had no idea how to finish it. I had no idea I was going
Well,
to do that would do justice
wow.
to this story. And so 10 years go by, and I'm like, I check my contract, and I'm like, oh, I get my rights back. I'm gonna tie this thing off. Let me see what I
Right.
can do. So I made a couple new characters and continued the old characters and brought it in to a finish. And I was like, there's this Zen saying among writers that your characters tell you what they want to do, your story tells you what it wants to
Yes.
do after a while, and it gets out of your control. And that's exactly, it sounds lame and zen, but it's true.
But it is true.
Yeah, and so the story told me, and the characters said, this is what we want. And I was like,
Mhm.
okay, let's do that. And that's where it ended up. And
That is so awesome.
I'm really happy with it. And then I re-released the audiobooks. Garrett Michael Brown
Mhm.
did the audio for all three, and he's great, and he did a
You
great
did a
job.
really good job because I'm a real snot when it comes to audiobook voices. And if you don't have I can't. I just can't. There's a couple of small indie
Yeah.
authors that I just can't because their narrators just not it grates on my ears.
Yeah,
But
I loved working with R.C. Bray.
mhm.
He partnered with me after he did Suffer the Children for Gallery Books, and then he came to me and was like, "I'm looking for more work," and I'm like, I don't know anything about this stuff. I'm like old school, like audiobooks are for joggers and truckers. So I
Yeah.
have no, I
Yes.
don't, I'm amazed that this is like a huge thing.
Yeah.
There were a couple things I'm like forward thinking and I know what's going to happen. And then other things I was like, oh, okay, I'm dead wrong on that one. But R.C. Bray he did my Crash Dive series, and he did an apocalyptic series with me, Stephen Knight, and the late great Joe McKinney, called The Retreat, and
Okay.
that was a lot of fun to do with him. But then R.C. Bray he did The Martian,
Yeah.
and he became a rock
He
star
got big. Yeah.
in audiobooks.
That's
And
amazing.
he brought probably more readers to Crash Dive, my little submarine series, World War
Mhm.
II series, than I may have. I like to think it was a good story. It's a good story, but he's such a rock star. He has his own fan base. So
That's
That
cool.
those sales on that series are still roaring. This little
That's amazing.
thing I did, and but he went on to bigger and better things. He's like a rock star now,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And he's working with the biggest and the brightest. So, and I'm like straight up mid list, so
But
I'm
that's
not
cool.
A
You get
list.
to say, I knew you win, you
Yeah, but
know?
he and I still get along, and we talk about like, oh, I'd love to work with you. I'd love to work with you too. Again, but
That's so awesome.
I ended up meeting Garrett Michael Brown on
Hmm.
Facebook of all things, just like you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he's like, I am dying to work with you, and I'm theater guy. I'm new to this. Give me a chance, put me in coach. And I'm like, all right, listen, I got this. But
No
I looked
problem.
around and I didn't see anybody I liked better
Yeah.
because I kept trying to replace RC Bray, right?
Hmm.
And then I was
Right.
like, well, let me just give this guy a shot. And we did this. We did Armor, which was a series, a 5-book series about a crew of a Sherman tank in World War II, and carrying all my World War II stuff. And he read that and he did a great job, and he really nailed the characterizations and the accents and everything. Like, he's a consummate professional.
Hmm.
When I get the book to proof, which is always fun because as the author, you're like, you get to experience your book as if you're a reader,
Right. All
if that
over
makes sense.
again.
When you listen to the audio and you get this little chill, like, oh, that's so cool.
Yeah.
um, and he did really good job with it. Very little proofing involved. Consummate professional. uh Everybody keeps their promise. I just like doing business with people like that.
That's excellent.
And so he ended up doing the whole, when we I re-released the Infection series, he did the whole with a fresh edit, and et cetera, et cetera. He did the whole thing, and did a really bang up job with it. So,
He really did. Because that was the one that introduced me to you.
mhm,
And I loved it. I
yeah.
was obsessed. And like I told you, I drive for my job, and whoever was in the vehicle with me had to listen to. I don't care. I'm in the middle of this thing. I have a
Yeah.
picture. Leave me alone. Don't
Yeah.
talk. So it was amazing. So when did you okay, one question at a time, Jen. When did you get published?
Oh, well, that book came out in 2011. I'm kind of an old guy now. Like, I grew up in the 80s,
Hmm.
loved Robert E. Howard. Talk about wish fulfillment. Conan gets the girl and slays
Yeah.
his foes with a battle axe, and it's just so fun for
Yeah.
a teen boy growing up on a farm in New Jersey, and what desperately wanting some type of escape into this fantasy. And Robert E. Howard said, "Come to my fantasy world," and I was like, "I'm in. I love it." And I wanted to be him, uh, write like him, and that's Colson Whitehead says you read and read to find out what kind of author you want to be, and then you write and write to find out what kind of author you are. And
Wow.
so you write and write. Your early efforts, a lot of times you're trying to be like, for a while I was trying to be Chuck Palahniuk, I was trying
Oh,
to be
yeah.
Robert E. Howard, I was trying to be Stephen King, until I
Yep.
found my own voice. But that was all through the 90s, and I wrote a bunch of novels in the 90s. I would just go on these tears, and felt like I was in a Kafka novel where I was invited to attend this party I wasn't allowed to enter. And because published to get you had to get publishing credits to get published, but you had to get published to get the publishing credits. And the best path for it back in those trad days
Hmm.
was to get short stories published, but I'm not a short story guy. And it
Yeah.
was a whole other thing I did, like, use query letters, tons of paper constantly going out the door with what they called an SASE, a self-addressed stamped envelope, coming back.
Yep.
Then
Yep.
you had to get agents, and then you had publishers, and it was constant churn.
Yeah.
And then the agents would say, and a lot of times they'd just send you back a form letter, unread, your work unread. They would just send it
Yeah.
back. You're just flooded with stuff, and interns were reading it. And every once in a while, you get a nice note that would give you hope, but most of the time, it was just form. And then an agent would send you back a form rejection, and they'd send you a flyer of their new book, how to get published. It's
And you're like,
almost like
gee,
Yeah,
Thanks.
thank you. Almost like salt in the wound.
Yep,
Like, I
yep.
didn't read your work. Thanks for sending it to me. Here's a book on how to get published. Good
Buy
luck.
my book.
Yeah, buy my book. And I'm like, ay, ay, ay. So um, then this miracle happened, which was in the late 90s. Xerox came out with this machine called the Docutech. And the Docutech allowed you to do ultra short runs of books. And I was working at an ad agency and I was interested in books. So I became a publisher.
Hmm.
I went in Writer's Digest. I recruited these writers to write technical books for building managers
Wow.
and release them as a series. And those books you could sell them for $80 because it
Uh-huh.
was a very small market, very specialized information.
Right.
And I did that for a couple of years while I moved to New York and I was editor of a lighting design magazine. And then the company I worked for had a facility manager magazine and they invested in my company. They gave me support
Right.
as a revenue share. And I ended up selling that, but it really woke me up to DocuTech. And what was great is by the very end of the 90s, when I had sort of forgotten about it, the technology had progressed to the point where you could do really good, cheap fiction paperback books. And so I ended up meeting this microbrew press in Oregon called Salvo, and they
Hmm.
published Tooth and Nail because my daughter had been born. I had turned 40, and I was like, I'm done. I tried, but this is an enormous amount of labor for
Yeah.
something I enjoy, but like is not getting me anywhere.
Right.
And it's sort of a downer.
Yeah.
And uh, I had gotten two books published with Salvo. Before that, it was Paranoia, which was a psychological thriller, and then The Great Planet Robbery, which is a sci-fi novel. And they did okay, but nothing great. And I was just starting to get really bummed out about it. And my daughter was born, and I was like, and by then I was freelancing. I was living
Hmm.
in Canada with my wife now, ex-wife. But I said to her, you know, if I put more time into my freelance business, I'll get money. I know that. But if I put more time in my fiction, I might not get anything, and I need to be a provider. But then I had this crazy idea. I'd read this novel, Eagle in the Snow, about the last Roman legion on the Rhine. And even though the empire is decaying and dying around them, they have their duty. They fight to the last man, trying to hold back the German hordes and when they fall, it's as if Rome has already fallen. You just
Right.
know it's done. These were the guardians, right?
Yeah.
And I had this great idea of an army unit in New York City fighting that fight against a zombie apocalypse.
Okay.
And even though the country they know was dying, the people they're trying to protect are actually trying to kill them, uh, um, or are somewhere else in the country, their loved ones. But they do their duty to the last man. And I just thought that was just such a great romantic idea that I had to write it. And I had always been curious. I was a fan of zombie fiction, and I was always curious, like whatever happened to the world's greatest military?
Right. Right.
Well, we have these survivors running around, pew pew, headshots,
Yeah.
and
You're telling me our military didn't make it?
yeah, exactly. Like, how does this happen? And so I tell their story,
Hmm.
how they failed, why they failed, but what they accomplished
That
in
makes
doing
sense.
so. And that book just blew up,
I bet.
absolutely blew up, and that's what ended up getting me into Permuted with two more zombie books, and from there into an agent, and there into Big Five, and I've been writing and doing self pub and Big Five ever since.
Wow. What a story you have.
Yeah, it's great.
My God.
I
You,
call it falling up the stairs.
yes,
Like
pretty
I cannot tell
much.
you how I did that. Hard work and luck
Yeah.
is the formula, I would
Because
say.
I mean, you've pretty much done, every author's dream, especially, I literally just started writing books a year and a half ago
Yeah.
and have gone through a small press and like I could only ever since I was like 13, 14 years old, if I couldn't be a cop, I wanted to be an author. And
Yeah. Why
that
not both?
you, yeah, and you, right, exactly. And you've lived the actual, hey, you gotta have, because I grew up in the 80s and 90s where you had to have an agent, and
Yeah.
then
Yep.
and go through them, and nobody would look at you, and I'm
Yeah.
like, I don't think I could handle the rejection, so I just didn't even bother.
Yeah.
So, me growing up, and then finally I get into this group of great indie authors where everybody publishes themselves or knows a small press. I got hooked up with small press. Angry Eagle Publishing,
Mhm.
DJ Cooper. She's great, and
Yeah.
she took me on and was like, "Oh yeah, I'll publish your books, no problem." And
Yeah.
I was just like, "Oh my God, half of my dream is coming true." So
Yeah.
now,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
not only have I been published, but next thing is, I want to be able to hit a store with my book.
Yeah.
So that's where
Yeah.
I'm at. But
Yeah. Yeah.
you lived the dream. You went all the way. That's amazing. So
Yeah.
you're still
You
doing both then?
um oh yeah, I still self-publish,
Hmm.
mostly military fiction. And uh and then, for Hachette, I've done, I had that one book come out with Gallery, and a little bit of time went by. It was a bad deal. If you want a bad deal bad enough, you get a bad deal. But
Yeah.
I did get my cover. I did get my credit. I did get a little beachhead in Big Five, and writing's a long game,
Yeah.
right? So you have to be in it for the long haul.
Yeah.
And it, uh, then I got in with Hachette, which is like Orbit Books. They have like
Mm.
lots of imprints.
Yeah.
They're one of the biggest Big Five publishers, fiction publishers in the U.S.
Hmm.
And I've worked with them on 4, 5 titles, and I have a contract for 3 more. So it's just I'm very lucky. I'm what's called
Yeah.
in the stable, the
Yeah.
stable writer, stable, and I'm mid-list sales, mid-list. I'm happy
That's
with that.
awesome.
I don't
Yeah.
have to
Right.
be Stephen King. I don't have
Y-
to be. I'm just
Exactly.
happy to be in the game. Don't tell them, but I'd pay them to
Yeah.
publish me. Like, it's just happy to be living the life. But as far as what makes or breaks it, you you have to have the right book at the right
Right time.
place at the right time.
Yep.
And so Tooth and Nail was it for me. Like, zombies were just getting big. The Kindle was just getting big.
Yeah.
And that book came out, and boom, there was a huge appetite.
Yeah.
And man, if you were in zombie fiction back then, the world was your oyster. Like,
Yeah. There wasn't many.
so much. Yeah, there were only maybe 40 of us. Jonathan Mayberry, Joe
Yeah.
McKinney, they were leading the pack. Um and and then everybody else, we're just having fun.
Yeah.
I went to this show called ZombieCon in Seattle in 2012, and people were taking our picture. Like, you just felt like a rock star. Like, it was
Yeah.
just so funny.
Because you're one of the
Um,
OGs. You're one of the originals.
yeah, it was
How
crazy.
does
We could
that
not
feel?
sell enough books at that show, and
How, I
it was
can't
just,
even imagine.
yeah. And I was hanging out with Jonathan Mayberry, and like, it just was like my head was spinning. It just
Yeah.
felt like it was so
He
wonderful.
he was just out here at the Tucson book walk or something like that.
Yeah,
Tucson has a book walk every year or something where they
that
have
dude is
like,
the hardest working
I swear.
author. Like, so it's ZombieCon. Me and like my fellow Bermuda Press guys, like, we were up all night BSing and drinking
Hmm.
and having a great time, tearing it up. We just drag ourselves into the show the next day like this, and he's
Yeah.
sitting there at this little coffee area, on his laptop, and he's like, "Yep, I got 3,900 words in so far today." I'm
What
like,
are you?
I,
I just woke up and you what?
that dude, he's crazy. Like,
Yeah.
he knows how to play it. Like, he knows how to do it. He's like a role model.
Yeah.
Um, get in as many markets as you can. Dig in, build up a fan base across each. Get those true fans who will follow you anywhere. Spend the time on social media. Do
And he
social media
does.
correctly. Like, he really build a brand. He's help other authors. Be
Yeah.
supportive. He's like one of the most supportive authors. Um, he gives blurbs left and right. Like, he's
That's
just
amazing.
Yeah, so he's just a good guy, and works his ass off,
Yeah.
and has everything to show for it. Like, he's done
And
really
that
well.
is, that is something that a lot of people don't understand. They think that, oh, you're an author. You just write books.
Yeah, yeah,
It is not that easy.
yeah,
Okay. I have and I'm not I don't know if you're a planner or a pantser. I am a pantser and I have my characters are telling me, "No, we're going this way." And I'm like, "But I
yeah,
want you to go this way." And they're like, "Bitch, we're going this way."
yeah, yeah, yeah,
So it's like that whole they take on their own lives
yeah,
and it's all in your head and you can't explain it because
yeah,
the story is already 6 chapters ahead of where you're at and you're like, "Wait, I need you to go back."
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Because I'm like trying to write this.
yeah.
So it's I guess that, how do you have to organize everything out like in an outline, like how they taught us in school, or do you just fly by the seat of your pants and they tell you what to do?
I,
We
I'm
touched on that a bit, but
I am definitely a plotter,
okay.
and I have to be, for efficiency.
Uh-huh.
In the '90s, I would have a beginning and an end,
Mm-hmm.
and I would knew my ending, so I would just write between point A and point B, and
Right.
then I'd be like tearing it up for the first 30, 40,000 words, and then I'd run out of gas because I was like, I'm not really sure how to connect this,
Yeah.
and you get that weird no man's land in the
Yeah.
middle of the book.
The
Yeah.
story kind of dies and you're like, what is going on here?
Yeah, 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 yeah. And because you're like, I just want to get to the climax right now. I just,
Yeah.
I set it up. Now I want to have the climax, but no, you need a middle.
Yep.
And so planning really taught me how to do the middle. Planning taught me, I think, to tell better stories, and it definitely helps me be more efficient. So I can write, like, when I wrote the Armor series, that was 200,000 words in a single year,
Holy crap.
plus another 100,000 words for a novel for Hachette. So, like, I can produce so much more. I can write two or three novels a year, or a small series, if I plan. And so what I do is, but it's not outlining like in school.
Okay.
It's what you do plotting. You're using a story structure, or you can use a character arc, which is another form of planning, or you could
Mm-hmm.
use both. I've used either one and both, depending on what the novel wanted to be.
Right.
And so if you use the plotting story structure approach, basically your first 25, it's not thirds, it's quarters. All right. So the first quarter of your book is the normal. You have an inciting incident. That's your hook. You're bringing people in. You're foreshadowing the central conflict. Then you show what the normal life is like. Then boom, for around that 25% mark, something big happens. You introduce central conflict. Everything changes. Now the protagonist is reacting until the middle of the book. Bang, something big happens. Now they go on the offensive. They're being proactive. They're trying to solve the problem, but they fail. Boom,
Right.
uh, false victory or apparent defeat. Then that's three-quarters of the way through the book. Something big happens, changes everything, and then they go all in to win or lose. And then you have your
My
climax
God.
denouement.
That
And
is
if you start to
amazing.
break it up, these points, it's a lot more, and it's an 80,000 word book. It's like 20,000 word stories, really.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah. And
seems more manageable. It doesn't
it
seem like,
does.
so, you're staring at the screen going, what's going to happen next? You know what you're
I
writing
have
towards.
40 more thousand words left.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, this book is
It's
done and I'm only at 40,000 words. It's like,
yeah.
write a 40,000 word book and self publish it. I'm totally cool with that.
Right.
Um, or, maybe
Go
plan it
the
out. Yeah.
distance.
So the other thing you can do is a character arc, which is like some variation on the hero's journey, right? So you have a character, they have a misbelief, they something happens that changes everything, call to adventure. They're like, you have to do something to, and it's like, no, I don't really want to, but they're kind of compelled. So then they take this journey and they confront the consequences of their misbelief or flaw, and they conquer that misbelief or flaw. usually in opposition to an antagonist who isn't a villain so much as who they will become if they don't solve their flaw. Usually an extreme version of the thing that is wrong with the protagonist,
Right.
the thing that needs to change. They conquer the antagonist. They may not get what they want. They have a want. They may not get what they want, but they get what they need.
Right.
I look at, if you want to learn about um, character arcs, watch Shrek. It's like perfect example.
Oh my
Okay,
gosh.
so
Yes.
he lives in a swamp. There's a character defining moment is he's reading a fairy tale and he wipes his butt with it, right?
Yes.
And he's
Yes.
funny, he's likable, he's funny, but he has a flaw. He's an ogre, and
And ogres are
because of
like
that,
onions.
he doesn't like himself. He does
Yes.
he has bad self-esteem and he thinks everybody hates him. So he thinks he has a misbelief. His misbelief is I'm better off alone.
Right.
So everything after that, the call to adventure, what he wants is to get his swamp back, but that's not what he needs. He needs to have friends. He needs love. He needs Fiona, and he Kumquat or King or the King is
Farquaad.
Farquaad. Thank you. Is
Kumquat.
his
Now that is his name forever.
is his antagonist, and
Yes.
he conquers. And there's that perfect moment at the end where Farquaad's saying, "You're you're better off alone because you're ugly and you're an ogre and no one will ever love you.
Yeah.
I'm the one they love." Um, and then he realizes, no, I am loved
Yes.
and I am lovable. And he, because that is the antagonist's greatest weapon, is pointing out where you're
Yeah.
weak and say just telling you to give in to what your misbelief is. But no, I had to overcome. And then Shrek ends up at the end. He has friends. He has
And
a
a
wife.
karaoke party.
Yeah, the karaoke party. Everybody.
Everybody's
And
there
so,
and a good
so if
time.
you plan these things out, so I plan these things out, and I fill up notebooks of notes
Well, that
and
makes sense
ideas
when you put it
and
that way.
yeah, and probably the absolute best book you can get, and it is like hands down the best book on writing I've ever read. And I use it as a workbook. It's like so mangled, this thing,
Uh-huh.
that because every time I write a book, I take it out and I use it as my blueprint.
Uh-huh.
And it asks questions, and I think and I write and I think and I write, and I by the end of this process, I dream the book in a way. That sounds
Mhm.
zen too, but it's true. I dream the book. It's happening in my mind, almost like I'm watching it as a movie.
You're
And I can just
envisioning
see
the
the
win.
story. I'm sorry.
You're envisioning the win like they do in
Yeah.
sports. It's
Yes.
actually very normal.
Yes. And I can actually see the story in my head, and then I start formally outlining it. But the outline isn't like chapter one, A, B, and C and D.
Yeah.
It's this
Yeah.
happens and that. It's no, it's this is my character, this is that, this is that. If you do the character arc approach, you not only know it's the hardest thing, right?
Yeah.
Characters, like I don't know my character. I have to write 40,000 words before I get to know my character.
Right. About a
I
person I have no
can't do
clue.
that. I don't have
Yeah.
time for that. I have teens and a day job and work.
Yes.
I'm trying to write these novels as a second career. I
Yeah.
can't. I have to know the character, so I know my characters before I start writing the book because I know what the journey they're going to go on and what their misbelief is. And once know these things, I know how they take their coffee. I know what kind of ice cream they like. I know where they went for vacation last year. I don't have to roll dice to build a D&D character sheet.
Right.
I know who they are because I know who they are, their
Wow.
essence, right? So
Yeah,
once you know them inside, you know all the things outside. So
you just
um,
gave a huge, I mean, this is
it's a
gold
big
mine.
aha, right?
It
It really
is. It
is.
really is because it's
Yeah.
like for 1 minute you're like, well, duh. Why wouldn't I have done it that way? But then on the other hand, I've been doing it like a pantser for so long that
You love
I've
that.
gotten in the habit. And
You love
it
that.
but there is
Yeah.
room for evolving and this is
Always,
great. This is
always,
great.
always be
So,
reading, always be
yeah.
writing, and and the and an aside there
Mhm.
is they did a study on the brain of writers and who were
Oh boy.
professional writers versus novice writers. And they found that in professional writers who've been doing this for many, many years, their brains are wired for it, to
Uh-huh.
storytelling, the way athletes, like a professional basketball player's brain is wired to visualize the hoop shot.
Uh-huh.
And so there's this prejudice in our society about which professions require practice,
Right.
which, so we tend to think of writers are born, not made. But the
Right.
answer is it's both. I mean, it's really just creative problem solving and expression and vocabulary and
Yeah.
language skills and motor skills, and it's all those things. But none of them is pure genius. It's there's also theory of mind where you can get into someone else's head and guess their intentions. So empathy is really good. There's some things that make a better, I think you're born with that make a better writer. But for most part, it's the same as picking up a violin. If I did that tomorrow, it would sound like cats and heat.
Yeah.
But over a couple of years, I could probably pass off a decent Mozart tune. So, but not immediately. So it's the
Right.
same thing with writing. You have to, so always be reading, always be writing. And then the last thing, always look at craft. And you don't know, people are like, well, this works and you can't tell me what to do. Writing is an art. And yeah, okay. All I'm advising is read, look at a craft book and find that one thing. You know, Nietzsche says one sentence can change your whole world, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Transform everything, one sentence.
Yes.
Find that one thing. Like I would go to cons and I'd be like, I go to panels and I used to smoke, so I'd have smoke breaks with people, and it was
Yeah.
great way to meet people.
Yes.
And I'd be like, and they'd be like, oh, I do this, and I'm like, you just exploded my brain. I have my takeaway. I'm gonna leave this con, go
Mm-hmm.
home, and there's that idea of like you push at a wall, and you're like,
Yeah.
so much effort, and you push it an inch, and you're like, oh, I got an inch, but then you look side to side, and it's like a lot. Not that
Yes.
inch is a lot of
Yes.
territory. So I would say always look for that one little thing, and that will help. That will level you up. You incorporate it into your fiction. Then you internalize it. Then you
Yeah.
do the next thing. Then you do the next thing. Right. You don't want to do anything that feels alien to you, or that feels like you're being false to yourself. Right. So that's why incremental change is really good. But if you want to try something sweeping, the book I was talking about is Anatomy of Story by John Truby.
Mm. Okay.
Brilliant. And you read it and it's all movie examples.
Uh-huh.
And you could tell this guy was writing for script writers, but it's not script writing, it's storytelling. He just happens to be speaking more to the script writer.
Right.
But it's just so great.
Spot on, huh?
It's like a blueprint for how to tell a story really well. And so for everything from character to plot to theme to the moral argument, everything is in there. And use it as, you know, use it wherever it makes sense and
Oh
how it
my
can help
God.
you, and don't use it doesn't.
You're so knowledgeable and amazing. Do you teach classes or something? Are you a professor now or are you just a full-time author?
Well, I give, there's local writing cons, and
Mm-hmm.
I'll go give a talk on something.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
I love to do those things because I learn so
Yeah.
much. So there's this local show called When Words Collide, and I'm a speaker, pretty frequent speaker at it. And so
Okay.
I'm like, well, what could I teach this year? I'll do something on theme, symbolism, and figurative language.
Okay.
And I'll do an hour on that. So it's PowerPoint slides, and it's like a roller skate ride through the
Right.
topic. But I'm like, well, what do I know about theme? I know a little bit. I can define it, but let me see what the experts. So I read like 10 books on theme,
Mm-hmm.
and then I'm like, oh yeah, oh, and then I pull all the best stuff and put it into a PowerPoint presentation, and bang, deliver it.
Wow.
And so I learned a lot in the process,
Mm-hmm.
and then I get to give something back. Um, but yeah, there's also a local writing center I've started to work with a little bit, and I just proposed today actually a 3.5 hour workshop
Nice.
on dialogue, character arcs, and theme, and we'll see if they're interested. But yeah, it's not a
Oh,
big
wow.
deal for me to present. I do it on invitation.
You
But
are,
my
because you
focus
have a
is to just
lot.
write the best book I can write and keep my relationship going with the chef.
But the funny thing is you're like you're telling me all this stuff and you're like it's kind of it's not I don't want to you're coming as a not a superior, but a veteran. You're
Yeah,
coming to us as a veteran and you're giving us this information whether we knew we needed it or not. And
yeah.
you're
Most of it I didn't make up.
yeah, and the funny thing is, it's like
I
it's
found it.
all and you're not one of those that's like, well, I've been doing this since you are so down to earth. You're amazing. I'm in awe and inspired by you.
Well, I'm
That's
glad you're
awesome.
inspired.
Yeah,
That's great.
that's the
That's the
only thing
key.
you could
That's the
ever
idea.
wish for.
Yeah.
So, no, I have to ask, since we're obviously close to the same age, do you use pencil and paper or do you use a computer to write your notes and
I type 100 words a minute. So
holy
I'm
crap.
yeah. So I'm all about. I love
Jeez.
the typing, composing at the keyboard.
Uh-huh.
Although not cool at all. Like I'm not Stephen King and I'm blasting Black Sabbath while I'm writing my scary. No, I'm
He was
just
also drunk all the time, so
yeah.
we're
Me, it's like dead quiet.
yeah.
The cat meows, and I'm like,
Shut up.
like you broke my fugue. Um, and because I just go into this a state of excitement catatonia, and I'm like,
Uh-huh.
you know, for hours.
Yeah.
But I like being able to write as almost as fast as I can imagine.
Yeah.
So the 100 words a minute comes in really handy. On the other hand, there are times when I feel like I'm getting close to the end, and you're on that sweet downhill, and you're writing. I'm writing too fast, and
Yes.
I want to push the brakes on a little bit and get into back to character a little bit more because things are
Yeah.
happening so much.
Yeah.
And so I will, um, sometimes I'll get the pad out and I'll just start. If not write a scene, I will just sit there and just sometimes or in the shower, eyes closed, like
Yeah.
imagining the scene, and yes, that's it. That's what I need. And then I'll write it down. So I do like to use a pen and paper to engage a little bit of a different part of my brain and force myself to write a little more emotionally and a little
Right.
slower.
Okay.
Um, but
Purposefully.
yeah, yeah, purposefully. But most of the time, I'm like that. Yeah.
I'm jealous because I'm lucky if I can do 45. So 45 words a minute. Then that's stretching it.
Well, that's above
Um,
average, so that's good.
it is, I
Yeah,
guess.
yeah, yeah.
So do you, oh, I lost my train of thought. The question that I was gonna ask you, and it was a good one, dang it. It had to do with how you, kind of, I guess, writer's block. There it is. See? Uh, what do you do? I mean, you told me, you kind of do things to slow down, but when you're getting to a point where you absolutely like your story is at kind of like a standstill, or do you not have to worry about that because you're a plotter?
I worry about it less because I'm
Okay.
a plotter.
Okay.
Um, I know what's going to happen next. The only time I get and be, it helps having I'm on contract.
Oh, yeah.
So my editor's saying at a big press is saying, give me your book
Yeah.
by this deadline because I paid you and we're
Yes.
going to put your book out. I'm like, okay, you know, um,
Right.
nothing's stopping me,
Right.
right? Uh, and I think that for a lot of writers, when they're before they find commercial success,
Hmm.
they there tends to be that imposter syndrome or
Oh, big time.
fear that
Hmm.
I'm putting this out there and everybody's gonna hate it and they're gonna
Yeah.
hate me. And something I love doing, I suck at. You know, like, so
Yeah. I
it's
don't want to
scary.
find that out because I've wanted this since I was 14, and
Yeah.
putting your book out there, it is
So
definitely,
yeah, it's scary. Yeah, I think that is a really big source of writer's block, and I guess I would get that sometimes. Um, and yeah, for me now, I think when I get writer's block, it's more about this. I have to make a choice for a character has to make a choice, and it could really change things, and I'm not really sure what to do. And the
yeah,
character's not telling me what they want to do, and the story's not really telling me what it wants to do. So I sort of like I painted myself into a corner, and I can get out of it. I just actually have two paths out of it, and I'm just not sure what to do. And so that would be my writer's block these days. And then
hmm
I just need to leave it alone for a bit and let my subconscious work on it
yeah,
until, or just talk it out with someone.
yeah,
Um, and which usually produces some type of solution
yeah.
that is satisfactory. But the good news for people with writer's block is it is a treatable condition.
Thank
There was
God,
a
because I'm kind of
university,
stuck.
yeah, there was a University of Toronto heart surgeon guy, somebody like that, who actually wrote a white paper about writer's block, citing it as a condition and saying it is treatable.
Thank God.
And he cited all these different, and he was talking about academic writers, and but could any writers, and
Yeah.
he actually came up with ways of getting around it. And yeah,
So what did he say?
he said, like, if it's mild, do things like optimize your workspace so there's no distractions, get rid of your
Mm-hmm.
phone, things
Yeah.
like that. um there are things like he didn't talk about, but somebody I read had this interesting idea where if you're on a tear and it's late at night, you just want to finish a scene, don't finish it tomorrow, and you'll be right in the middle of that fire, right? So
Yeah.
you just pick up where you left off,
Yeah.
and instead of picking up with a blank slate, especially if you're a pantser, right? You got that blank
Yeah.
slate.
Yeah.
Um, and then if it's a mediocre severity, things like getting an ideal reader who is very gentle and gives really good feedback and is supportive, a good listener. If it's chronic, one of the things that he said to do was have possibly negative consequences.
Ooh.
So, based on a study that was done in the 80s or 90s, where if people had to commit to writing, academic writers had to commit to writing so much output, and if
Mm-hmm.
they did fail to meet their goal, they had to give money to a cause they hated.
Ooh, and you're stabbing my pocketbook. No, thank you.
Yeah, and I'm supporting something I hate.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Oh
so it actually
man.
worked. The negative
I
consequences
bet
worked.
it did.
Yeah, and since then, they actually made apps. Like there's an app that does exactly that. It donates money to a charity or some organization you don't like,
Oh God.
um, if unless you meet a certain goal. And then there's another app. There was another app called something like Write or Die, and and
Starting to get into a horror movie. What
yeah,
is going on?
yeah, kinda, but wait, not physical death, but wait till you hear what it does. You write, and if you stop writing for more than 5 seconds, it deletes what you wrote.
Oh my God. That's an evil, evil
That
app.
is
That is
evil.
an
No,
evil
I'm like,
app.
no, no,
Oh,
no, no, no,
5 seconds?
no.
I
Yeah,
need that sometimes just to, get the brain fart out of my
yeah,
head. I just,
exactly, exactly. I
whoa,
don't want to
that's
zone out
quick.
for 5 seconds and then lose. Yeah,
Everything. Oh no, I'd
I've never
never.
used any of these
I'd
apps,
never
but
use
they're out there.
that ever.
The writer's block, like I said, is actually something that is definable. It has causes, and it is. There are things you can do.
Yeah, I find that a lot of mine is because I've backed myself in a corner. I don't plan. I back myself in a corner, and I have to, a lot of times, if I just like what you do, step away and visualize the scene, if I'm visualizing the scene, I can look around and see what is it that I need to describe. Because a lot of times I have problems describing my scene and what's
Mhm,
going on around me because I'm terrified that I'm over describing. Do you
mhm.
have that? Have you ever come across that? Have you done it? How did you fix it?
Well, remember I grew up on Robert E. Howard, who was the Purple Prose King and described everything.
Yeah.
And so I was a describer before I was a real writer and in the 80s and 90s. And yeah, I would the scene is very important. The world
Mhm.
building is very important. You do want it to feel organic. Um, you there are tricks with it. For example, if you are going to take a couple paragraphs and just describe something, it should be something that advances the plot. Like, so if I'm in a fantasy world where dragons are tamed and I'm somebody's going to be a dragon tamer and they're going to see the dragons for the first time, you can describe those dragons a lot and you can describe
Right.
the facility because it's very important. Um, and uh, but you should do it through the point of view, deep point of view. So if that character is a dragon tamer, but previously they tamed something else, lions. They would notice the things a lion tamer would notice: the iron bars,
Right.
security measures, the
Yeah.
whip, things like that, and say, well, or there's no whip. Like, how do you
Right.
discipline the dragons to get them to respond to you? Is it more carrot than stick approach? And so it all has relevance. So
Right.
you're describing, but it all has relevance. And then you can also describe through dialogue. So if they're in the desert, you don't have to. You can describe the desert, but then you can have people say like, "Well, it looks like it goes on for a million miles." That's like this, or
Right.
it's shimmering. Is that water? No, it's a mirage, and the heat waves, and so you can incorporate description into dialogue.
Yeah.
You can, but just there's lots of different tricks for it. So it doesn't always here's the block of
Yes.
description and
Yeah.
yeah,
And because I'm always worried. Of course, I'm pretty sure this is part of the imposter syndrome. And two of my dogs have come in the office. So if they're looking out the window. So if they bark, it's because they saw something.
no
But
worries.
and I apologize ahead of time. But like my issue, like I was always worried about over describing or making the work sound juvenile. But I think that's part of the imposter syndrome, and I'm not sure. And
Yeah,
because I know a lot of dialogue, there's a particular balance to the dialogue.
yes.
And
I say, write it. You want to be careful with adjectives. It's always better to have a good, well-placed adjective than adjectives, period.
yeah.
Um, if he's a nice guy, that does nothing for your brain. You
Right.
make it you
I
you
know
your
lots of
language
nice guys.
processing
Yeah.
center activated, and you made a moral judgment like, oh, he's nice. Okay, what is? But if he's like, the guy is iron. You need he doesn't break. You know,
That's
he's
something
he's
completely
rely,
different.
and it's like your brain is like now going crazy. And all these
Yeah.
little parts are firing up. You're feeling iron. You're seeing iron
Yeah.
and you're attributing iron to a character, which is so the theory of mind is now activated. It's getting zesty because it's like, oh, he's
Yeah.
reliable. I made that connect leap myself. He's iron. So, um, so yeah, like so I would say do that. But I would say write if you're gonna pants. The
Yeah.
advice I would give
Just
is
right.
just write it without giving a crap,
Edit it
any
later.
crap,
Yeah.
and then do your second draft.
Yes.
Right? Being aware of the plot structure and what
Hmm.
generally works. and then applying it then. But pantsing the first time, kind of planning the
Yes.
second time because you know the structure and everything. And you have all this material to work with. In a way, your pants becomes your outline, your
I
initial
love
outline.
it.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then
I
you go
love
back
it.
and do the second draft. And oh my God, it's so fast writing a second draft
Yeah.
compared to a first draft. So yeah, so I would say do that. But I would say don't get hung up spending forever on that first pants because you're going
Right.
to have to rewrite it anyway, right? I
Exactly.
would say that go for speed. I mean, Tooth and Nail was kind of like that.
Get it out there.
Zombie book.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just cranked it
Yeah.
because I was so sick of writing complete books and trying to get them published and being told no that I wrote 10,000 words and sent it to Bermuda Press. And I was like, um, if you do you want me to what do you think? And they're like,
Yeah.
oh, send in the rest of the book. This is really, really good. And I'm like, oh,
Oh shit.
eh,
Yeah,
first draft,
hold on.
send it in. And then away we go, right? So I because I was like, I'm not writing the whole book. So you
Right.
can tell me no, and then it sits in my
Exactly.
drawer. I'm gonna write 10,000 words. And then if you say yes, I will write the rest of the book in like weeks.
That's a great
So that's what I
idea.
did, like 3 weeks. I wrote the rest of the book.
Nice. Unfortunately, my God, I've got to have you back on. We are coming down to the last couple of minutes, and
Sure.
I want to get for you where everybody can find you. Do you have a website? You're
Yes.
on Amazon, you're on Audible. Give us that website.
Yes. I'm CraigDiLouie.com, and I you'll see all my books there. World War II, horror, um, zombie, dystopian, apocalyptic,
A
all
little bit of
sorts of
everything.
great fiction there. Yeah, you'll find something you like, and if you don't, I do a blog there too where I review just for fun, try
Oh,
to make the
sweet.
internet a better place.
Right.
I review books and movies and stuff, the media I've consumed that I enjoy, and and think other people would too. So if you don't like my book, you'll find something. There's
Oh,
also
I highly
that
doubt
you
people
will
are
like.
gonna not like your books because I'm telling you right now, I'm in love with your infection series. So that's gonna definitely have me off looking for other books of yours. So for
Well, I
sure.
hope so.
And oh yeah,
Yeah.
I'm definitely gonna be singing your praises. So
There, well, just one more thing. There's a page on my website as well called so craigdeloy.com/on writing,
uh-huh.
and it has all my When Words Collide and other presentations on there as
Sweet.
PDFs, or I wrote up this like an article based on the
Yeah.
presentation. So
Awesome.
lots of stuff there, like roller skate rides through dialogue, character arcs, theme, a whole bunch of stuff.
That is gonna be amazing. I
Yeah.
cannot wait to get to it. So yeah, we're definitely I'm definitely gonna be making sure that everybody's aware. So we'll put it up on there. CraigDiLouie.com.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I really appreciate you coming on and spending time with me and just giving me your little pearls of wisdom. I would love to have you back on at some point because I have questions about Annie from the from
Okay.
the book, from the infection series. And so I will definitely be talking to you after the show about getting you back on. But I am so thrilled. Thank you for taking your time today and
Well,
just
thanks
coming
for
on
having me
here
on.
and talking to me and everybody else. And hopefully you'll see an upsurgence in your book sales. But we really appreciate it. Thank you so much. And for everybody out there, uh, catch us next week. And this comes on Thursdays at 1 p.m. Central. So we look forward to seeing you on the next As the World Burns. Thank you so much. Have a great day, everybody.